Narcissistic sister kicked my daughter and me out of our parents' house. Now our parents are losing their home and begging for my help, but still refuse to hold my sister accountable. I'm 33F single mom of a 5-year-old daughter. I have been separated from my husband after my delivery because he cheated on me during pregnancy and the postpartum period. That's another story we'll share that in some later posts. So I kicked him out of my life and moved in with my parents 2 days back. I came back from work to find my younger sister, Eva 29F, sitting with her heavily pregnant belly. She had moved to Croatia with her husband after their marriage. I was happy because she had been nothing but evil to me. She never liked me. There was no particular reason for her hatred, but she considered herself superior to me. She would manipulate our parents against me. And being the younger one, she would get away with her nuisance. Though she's younger than me, she is big and strong while I'm petite and lean. If she grabbed my wrist, there was no way I would be able to free myself. Anyone who would see us can tell that I can never fight her physically, yet my parents never believed me when I complained that she had beaten me. They would say, "She's your small sister, how could she beat you?" So I remained distant from her. I even avoided talking to her unless it was absolutely necessary. Luckily, I got the chance to move out for high school, and it was such a relief now that Monster is back in my life. Seeing her pregnant, I thought she was here for her postpartum period. I asked Mom how long she was going to stay. Eva heard me and shouted right from the living room, "I'm here to stay. Do you have a problem with that? God, she hasn't changed a bit. She's still that narcissistic self." Mom told me that Eva's husband has got a transfer back to the States. He has got an accommodation from the company, but since Eva is pregnant, they think living with our parents is best for her. They can take care of her during pregnancy, and after childbirth I asked Mom if she had time to take care of her child. She meekly replied, "Yeah, I have two. Eva is still so young. How could she raise her child alone? She needs help." I was lost for words. Like, really? Eva is 29 and she can't raise her child on her own? I was 27 when I delivered a baby. I handled my postpartum alone because my husband was busy. My mom also didn't come to help me. She said I should learn to raise a child. It's a part of motherhood now. When her golden child is pregnant, she's ready to become a nanny for her. Such a hypocrite there. Favoritism has always been evident. That's the reason I have always kept my distance. When I got separated from my husband, I rented a house and didn't come to live with my parents, but Dad insisted I live with them. He said their house is too big for two of them, and besides, they would be here to watch over my daughter when I go out for work, or so he said. Instead of paying rent for a separate house, I could live with them and pay rent to them. It seemed like a fair deal for me. Moreover, I was going through a lot of emotional turmoil. To think straight pregnancy, postpartum, husbands, adultery, divorce you. So when my dad offered support, I rushed to grab it. I moved in with them. I didn't face any such problems living with them, just that the support which he promised to watch over my daughter got faltered. It was only a few times that Mom agreed to babysit my daughter. I had to call a nanny. Most of the time she said she can't babysit full-time, so I should hire a nanny while she could keep an eye if the nanny is doing her job properly. She wanted to take the role of baby monitor. LOL. I thought it was better to have Mom around than to leave my daughter alone with a stranger, so I had a full-time nanny as well. It's so disheartening to see how Mom is circling around my sister to provide her with food, meds, and supplements. She never did that to me in my 9 months of pregnancy. She barely visited me 2 or 3 times, and only once after my delivery ever since I got 3:30. To know that Eva is going to stay here, I have a feeling that they are up to something. I mean, how could they agree to let Eva move in permanently? We don't have that big a house to let them in. I'm happy to move out, but my daughter is too small to be left alone without any supervision. Though my mom doesn't babysit her exclusively yet, it feels safe to have her around. If I move out, I would always have to have a babysitter at home, and that too, I don't know how safe it is to leave a kid to a babysitter. I know I'm a clingy mom, but hey, I'm a single mother. The only hope of my life is my daughter. I know I tend to be overprotective about her, but what should I do? She's my lifeline. Update 1. Thanks for all the advice. It helped me calm down my nerves. My most dreadful thought came to be true 2 days after my post. I came home from work to find my stuff being packed and kept on the front porch, and my daughter sitting by it. I asked her who did this, and she said that, and had packed everything and made her sit there. My daughter is a quiet and well-mannered child. Poor girl has been sitting there for hours waiting for me. I asked her where was Grandpa and Grandma. She didn't say anything. She just hugged me and said she had been waiting for me to come back because she was so horrified of Aunt Eva. I asked her if Eva harmed her or scolded her. She sobbed and said that Aunt was yelling something which she didn't understand, and the way she was thrashing all my belongings. My daughter felt threatened. I stormed inside my room yelling at Eva for an explanation. She said, "Do you want to mess with a pregnant woman? I can cops on you for harassing me. You know I can do it, don't you?" I gave back, saying that I can also call the cops on you for harassing my daughter in my absence. She laughed and said, "Do you have any evidence Mom was here when I packed your stuff? You know whose side is Mom going to take, don't you?" With this statement, I understood it was futile to talk to her. I called out for Mom, but there was no response from her. She was home, but had locked her room. Eva's evil laugh made it clear that they all were ganged up against me. Eva smirked at my helplessness and said, "Take a hint, you dumbass. No one wants you here. We packed for you and made it easier for you. Can't you see I'm pregnant and I need space? Me and my child is going to stay here now. Get your lazy $1 moving." I said, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm not living Here for free like you I pay rent. Before I could say more she charged at me the way she used to do as a child. You pay rent, do you have receipt or lease paper? No, that's right. How long are you going to be a bum and suck on my parents' money? Such a loser, that's why your husband found peace in another woman's bed because you're useless. Disappear now if you don't want to get punched in front of your daughter. My daughter ran towards me and hugged me. She was petrified with all the shouting and chaos, so I loaded my car with my belongings and left with my daughter. There was nothing left to be discussed. My parents were spineless in front of her. She wasn't lying when she said that mom was there. She packed. In fact, mom and dad would have helped her pack my stuff. She's 7 months pregnant, and there's no way she would have been able to lift or drag my wardrobe and heavy suitcases without their help. They all are in this together. Her husband has a decent job, and they can easily afford to have their separate house. Still, she came behind me and chased me out. She is adamant to make my life miserable. She let her husband live alone at his company's flat while she's here busy troubling me. I don't know what wrong I did to her. She treats me in this way, and even my parents do not speak a word against her. I checked in at a hotel for a week and searched for a place to live. It was very difficult to manage work and house hunting. Finding a house in a week time is so impossible. One of my colleagues was looking for a flatmate. I requested her to let me in. No one wants a flatmate with a baby, but I assured her that my daughter won't disturb her and I would move out as soon as I find a place. She was kind to let me in. I have been living with her for 2 weeks now. I have found a place within my means and within the circumference of my workplace and my daughter's daycare, but the existing tenant would take another month to vacate. I have made the bookings already, just waiting for it to get vacated. It's almost 3 weeks since I have moved out, or rather kicked out of the house. My daughter still trembles with fear that Aunt Eva would come hunting for us and harm us. My poor little girl is not able to describe what exactly Eva had done to her, but she sobs that Aunt was just yelling at her and staring at her with wide eyes and threatening to hit her if she cried. She still sobs and wets her bed fearing Eva. I don't know how can I make her forget that incident. I feel so helpless to see her getting sad remembering about that day. I still can't fathom how unsafe my daughter would have felt that day. She was traumatized in my absence. That is about to be a mother, yet she has no empathy for a child. I'm never going to forgive her, and if I get any opportunity to take my revenge, I'm going to crush her. Update 2. So I was looking for an opportunity, and I got one. Like I mentioned, I was paying the rent for living at my parents' house over the last 1 year. Dad asked me to pay $5 grand extra on top of the rent, which he would return to me later. I agreed to help him out. I didn't know he was using my rent money and that extra $5 grand to pay the mortgage. Now that I have moved out, I didn't pay the rent in that extra amount. Dad called me up on the 10th of this month in a panic mode. Why have you not transferred the money this month? I got the message from the bank that the auto debit had failed due to insufficient balance. It made me crack up. He was so sure that I would pay the rent even after moving out that he didn't even check his account balance and keep the emergency funds. I said, hello, I no longer live at your house. Your golden child kicked me out, remember? So why should I pay the rent? He remained silent for a moment and said, how I'm going to pay the mortgage? I don't make enough money now. The sales at my store have dwindled. Whatever little I make, I use that to run the house errands. I was using the rent money and that extra $5 grand to pay the mortgage. I said, that's not my problem. I don't owe you anything. I paid for my stay and bought my own food. Ask your narcissistic daughter to help you out. I'm sure she would. I hung up the call within an hour. I got a call from my mom. She said, your dad is struggling to pay the mortgage, and instead of helping him, you're hanging up on him. Did you forget how we stood by you when your loser husband left you? This is how you pay back. Swallow your shallow pride and transfer the money you have been sending every month. I replied, do you even hear yourself? You let me live in your house because I paid rent and you used it for a mortgage. I hired a babysitter whenever I needed a helping hand. You didn't pitch in. What kind of support you're talking about? She realized that I was not going to stand and take it as I used to as a child. Now I know how to give back. She mellowed down. She was like, babe, Eva is pregnant. She needs more space. That's why she requested you to temporarily move out. Nothing to get bitter about this. I said, excuse me. She didn't request me. She threw me out while you all chose to shut your eyes and mouth. She tortured my daughter, and I can never forgive you all for that. She further tried to defend her entitled daughter by saying she's little immature. You shouldn't mind her words. You're the older one and wiser. You be the bigger person and forgive her and send us the money. Haha, it's all about the money. I chucked and said, I'm no longer the weak doormat that you all could push over. You guys always favored her over me, and by letting her harass my daughter, you'll have crossed all limits of sanity. I never wanted to stay with you all, but still stay because I feared leaving my daughter alone to a nanny, but now my daughter feels threatened more by you guys than a stranger. She started sobbing and apologizing. I cut her off and said, I'm done getting manipulated by crocodile tears. I'm not going to give a penny, and they stopped bothering me. They didn't call me after that. It's been a month since then. I think they are managing the mortgage by their own, or their golden daughter is helping them through it. I don't care what's happening in their life. I'm happy in my small cozy home with my daughter. I've hired a nanny who looks after her after play school. The nanny is a middle-aged woman who has a son 5 years elder to my daughter. She brings her son along to play with my daughter. They have a good time together. It feels so blissful to come home to a happy and loving daughter. Life does get better, we just need to hang in there. Update 3. Hello all, first of all thanks for all the love and support, means a lot to me, and second, sorry for not updating this thread often. 2 reasons for this: one, had no relevant update to post. I have cut off all ties with parents and narcissistic sister. 2, was too busy in life. I got promoted this year, yay, but it comes with extra responsibility, of course extra pay too, so got caught up with work and motherly duties. But I got an interesting update. This time last week, mom and dad showed up at my work. They didn't know where I live, so they showed up at my workplace. I told the security to ask them to leave because I was too busy to meet anyone. I could see from the window blinds that they were arguing with the security and not ready to leave. They looked fragile. And it seemed that they had aged by at least 10 years, and just a year mom was carrying an infant in her arms. I guessed it was Eva's child. It got me curious, and I went out to meet them. They started sobbing on seeing me. They came to me as their last hope to save the house. Dad said he could not pay the house mortgage. For the last 7 to 8 months, whatever savings he had, he used it to pay for the initial 2 to 3 months after I left. The bank gave them enough time to pay the money, but they kept defaulting. Last month, the bank kicked them out of the house and has put up the house for sale. They have been living in a dingy apartment since then. They came to me to help them save their house. I listened to them patiently and asked them why their entitled daughter didn't help them. They lowered their face and said her husband had kicked her out of the house because he found her cheating on him, and even the baby was not his. All the transfer stories and the company's accommodation were a lie. Her husband is still in Croatia, and their divorce is on the way. I was so shocked to hear this. I said, even after this you guys supported her? Mom cried and said, we didn't know about this. She didn't tell us. She said she was here for the delivery, but after you moved out and we asked her to help us with the mortgage, the truth came out. I was like, what did you do? After knowing the truth, hugged her and cried. You clearly supported her. That's why you holding her child in your arms. They were like, how could we leave her in that condition? She had nowhere to go. We dried up all our savings to pay for her medical bills. Their condition indeed seemed very pathetic. I remained silent, thinking what to do. Without thinking anything, I asked, where was Eva? At work. Mom was murmuring something, but Dad gave her a look and said, she's at home. She refuses to go to work. Mom interrupted him and said, how could she leave such a small baby and go to work? I laughed and said, really Mom, you're still supporting her? Her baby must be 7 to 8 months old. Women all over the world go back to work, leaving their 6-month-old babies at home, and Eva is no different, and given the condition she is in, she should have taken a job much earlier. They further pleaded with me for help. I said I didn't have that much money to save their house. Dad said that if I could pay for the defaulted months, he could request the manager to stop the sale of the house and we could continue the remaining payments in monthly. Amy, I said, I don't have that much money. I've used up my savings to pay the deposit of my house lease and for the admission of my daughter into elementary school. My mom made faces at my answer. I said, Mom, instead of making faces, try and understand that I'm a single mom taking care of myself and my daughter all by myself. After they left, I was feeling very low. My manager asked me about it. She saw me missing at my desk for over an hour. I discussed the matter with her, and she gave me an idea. I called up Dad and said I was ready to pay the piled-up mortgage and also the remaining ones, but he needs to transfer the house to my name. My manager suggested that I buy that house with my promotion and raise. I should be able to afford the mortgage since I have already helped them with the mortgage for so many years, and now helping them save the house. It should be a fair deal for them. In return, I would let them live in that house, but without their low-life daughter. Dad remained silent and said he would discuss that with Mom and let me know. I said, take your time. Not sure if you guys have enough. It's been a week since then, but they have not called me. It is an answer that they don't agree with my proposal. They are okay with seeing their house getting sold off and living in a shady apartment, but not letting go of their golden child and live comfortably. Good for them. They made their choices, and now they'll have to live by it. Today, while driving back from work, I thought of driving by my parents' house to see if the sale board is up, but then I brushed off the thought. I decided to cut them off my life a year ago and would continue to do so. I don't want them back in my life. I'm happy and content living with my daughter and seeing her grow and achieve new milestones. She's now in elementary school, and I couldn't be more proud. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Caught my wife having an affair with our friend during a couple's beach trip. Thanks to our prenup, I left her with nothing. I, 40 male, and my wife, 32 female, had just moved into a new neighborhood and we didn't know anybody there. Thankfully, through our children, we were able to meet some cool couples that we could hang out with. One of those couples, let's call them Larry and Pam, was especially cool to us. We had a lot of the same interests and they lived this sort of jet-setting lifestyle. Even though they had kids, it was something that my wife and I thought was. Knowing them, I started to notice that Larry was a little flirty. I joked about it one time when he was flirting with my wife, just telling him to back off because she's taken. Pam shrugged her shoulders and assured me that he was just a flirt and didn't mean anything by it. I was confident in my relationship and I wasn't worried about a little flirting. I've always been under the impression that it was harmless as long as it didn't evolve into anything else, but the flirting continued. It happened often enough that I was starting to get a little uncomfortable with it. My wife was gorgeous. This isn't saying that Pam wasn't, but Larry would have been crazy Not to want my wife, but I wasn't sure if he was respecting our boundaries. Pam and Larry sent their kids to a summer camp every year, and they were able to convince my wife and I to send our kids to the same one. The idea behind it was if the kids were all away for 2 weeks, we could take a grown-up vacation without them. It honestly sounded great. My wife and I were looking forward to going away with them. We thought that it would be a great opportunity to take time for ourselves and almost have a second honeymoon of sorts. In the weeks leading up to our departure, my wife had been growing a little bit distant. I kind of chalked it up to thinking that she was going to miss our kids while we were gone. 2 weeks away from them was more than we'd ever spent apart, and I knew it would be hard for her, but I noticed that she was making secret phone calls and texting people very privately. I was a little curious about what was happening. The day of the departure came, and we joined Pam and Larry at AV Vacation Rental. We all went on together. It was right on the beach. There was a jacuzzi tub on the porch. There was a large smoker grill, and we had high-end luxurious accommodations. It was heavenly. The first night that we were there, we bought some beer and wine, and we all sat outside after a man the grill and got a little drunk. I noticed that my wife and Larry were once again very flirty. I was in high spirits, so I once again laughed it off. I went to bed, and when I woke up the next morning, my wife was not there. When I got up and moved around the house, I saw that she was out by the water in her bathing suit and going for a swim. That would have been fine had Larry not been there with her. He was shirtless in his swimming trunks, standing very close to her. He was clearly looking her over in her bathing suit, and my wife made no effort to divert his gaze. Right away, I walked out and joined them. They both welcomed me as if nothing was going on, which made me feel a little better. I still didn't like Larry ogling my wife, so I practically dragged him back to the house. Later that night, all of us went out dancing again. We had some drinks and we were getting tipsy on the dance floor. I noticed that Larry was gravitating toward my wife. At this point, I was moving past the laughing it off phase. He was constantly around my wife, and it was rubbing me the wrong way. What was even more infuriating about it was that my wife was letting it happen. He would go over to her and put his hands on her waist, and she would lean into him. Did she think it was me? Was she that drunk? I waited until the following morning to ask my wife about it. She laughed it off and told me that I had nothing to worry about. She apparently didn't even remember dancing with Larry. On the third and final day of our vacation hit the fan. We were supposed to stay at the vacation rental for 6 days, but I ended up having to leave early because I walked in on Larry with my wife. We had gone the entire day without any issues aside from me catching glimpses of Larry looking at my wife and her bikini. I was happy with what my wife had told me, and I wasn't going to worry about it, but of course, as soon as you let your guard down, you realize that you were right. All alone, we wanted to throw some stuff on the grill, so I was out back doing that. Pam was with me and helping to skew some chicken and vegetables. I hadn't even noticed that my wife and Larry were missing. I ran inside to grab some more meat from the fridge, and I heard some shuffling from the laundry room. I paused and listened carefully to what it was. I could hear what was clearly two people trying to be quiet while having sex. I opened the door right away and saw my wife pinned against the wall with Larry in front of her. They were in the middle of having sex. They were so into it that they almost didn't even notice me walking in. Moments after I opened the door, Pam walked inside to grab some more vegetables and saw them too. She screamed at Larry, and he jumped backward, dropping my wife on the ground. Both of them looked at us like deer in headlights. They never thought we would catch them. I just walked away and went to pack my bags to leave. My wife chased me up to the room and tried to beg me not to leave and to forgive her. She said that he meant nothing. He had just been there at the right time. I had absolutely nothing to say to that. Was the laundry room the right time? It didn't make any sense, and I was done with it. I told her to get away from me, and she did. I noticed that her phone was on the nightstand in the bedroom charging, so I went through it just to see how long it had been going on. It had been going on for weeks. From what I could tell, it seems like she and Larry had been messaging each other about how excited they would be to go to the beach house. Larry told my wife that he was more excited to see her in a bathing suit than anything else. At first, my wife replied saying that it was inappropriate, but he then pursued it more. She ended up confessing to him that she had thought he was attractive, and she didn't mind a little secrecy in her life. They met up once before we all went to the beach house and had sex in our kitchen. I found Pam and I told her about everything I learned through my wife's phone, and she was just as hurt as I was. She and I ended up leaving the beach house together and going back home. The entire drive back, we were talking about how angry we were and how we wanted to ruin their lives. They didn't get to cheat on us and just be happy after. When I got married, my mother encouraged me to get a prenuptial agreement. I wasn't the wealthiest person in the world, but I had received an inheritance before I met my wife, and I had a comfortable nest egg. On top of that, I had a good job that paid me well and gave me good benefits. It was enough so my wife didn't have to work. Our agreement clearly stated that if we were to divorce, she would be given a percentage of my assets, with the exception of if we divorced due to her infidelity or her betrayal of our marital vows. Because she cheated, I could leave her without fear of losing a penny. That was the best thing that I could think of to get her where it hurt. She didn't come home until the following day, which made me question if she was just taking advantage of the time she had with Larry. I told her about how we would be getting divorced and how I wanted her out of the house, and she swore that I couldn't do that to her. She told me that she would have rights and that in our Divorce, she was entitled to half of everything. It almost seemed like she wanted it all along. I questioned if she ever loved me to begin with. I reminded her about our prenuptial agreement, and I watched the indignation in her eyes fade as she realized she was going to be completely screwed. Pam and I both ended up divorcing our spouses. I didn't have to pay sent to my wife, and I ended up selling the house. Now I'm just trying to pick up the pieces that were left behind in all the mess. I know that there are still some good people out there, but I just have to find them. If you love what we offer here, please support us by subscribing and activating the bell to receive all notifications when new content is published.